Hello, and welcome to the channel. For this video, I'm going to be taking a nostalgic look back at Boardwalk and Baseball. This was a theme park that was once located in Davenport, Florida, and was closed in 1990 and pretty much broke my heart. I don't think I can ever articulate what a magical place this was for me as a kid. It really did change my life. I doubt I'd be a YouTuber right now, focused on theme parks and travel videos if it weren't for my experiences at this amazing park when I was a kid. Now, before I jump into exploring the IMAX theater, right before it was bulldozed, I'm going to show you a tribute video of what it looked like while it was still open. Maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to understand what a magical place it was and why I'm so nostalgic for it. I hope you enjoyed this video today. So right now I'm walking around the inside of the IMAX theater at the former Boardwalk and Baseball Theme Park. And this was a couple weeks before it was bulldozed and destroyed. Now these glass doors that are on my left-hand side, this is like the main entrance area for the IMAX theater. This is right off of the front gates to the park. You would come into this concourse, and on your right-hand side would be the entrances to like the IMAX Theater and Studio One, which is where they filmed the ESPN trivia show. On my left-hand side, they had these giant photographic murals of the sister HBJ Parks at the time, which were Cypress Gardens as well as SeaWorld Orlando. When you purchased an annual pass to Boardwalk and Baseball, it also got you admission to those sister HBJ Parks, and it was great. I mean, like I said, I spent pretty much every vacation from 1987 to 89 in this park or Cypress Gardens or SeaWorld. Spent a lot of time there. We were basically HBJ Park exclusive in that time frame. We kind of skipped Walt Disney World for the most part, although I was there opening week for Disney MGM Studios, so that was the one exception. But for the most part, we were living in these parks instead. I'm not really an urban explorer per se. I had gotten written permission and signed a liability waiver to explore this building and, the former grounds of Boardwalk and Baseball. I just recently transferred this footage. I had filmed it on an old Sony Digital 8 camera, and I didn't have any way to play it for the longest time, and I finally digitized it so I could actually post it on YouTube. I filmed this right around the year 2000, 2001, something like that. At the time, I was attending the University of Central Florida, and I was part of what was called the History Club back then. And I had approached the real estate developer that had purchased the former Boardwalk and Baseball parcel and was redeveloping it into the mixed-use complex it is today, known as Posner Park. And they gave me their blessing to explore the property and salvage whatever pieces inside the IMAX theater that I wanted to. So I brought home a bunch of signage and blueprints and pretty much any memorabilia from Boardwalk and Baseball that I could fit in the U-Haul. And I'd once again like to thank Kitson Partners for being so gracious and understanding. This place was a big part of my life, and being able to save pieces of it for, I guess, future generations to see just meant a lot to me. And not a lot of real estate developers are cool like that. So I can't thank them enough, to be honest. So as you can see, I just entered the IMAX theater. And it's kind of an unusual building for Florida, because this is basically built into more or less a basement. This building goes down about 5 stories into the ground. And considering the high water table in Central Florida, it's kind of an unusual decision. But, that's what they did. This building that I'm walking around, I talk about Boardwalk and Baseball, but this was actually a previous theme park, also known as Circus World, and that was themed obviously around circuses, and it was originally built by Barnum and Bailey Circus. This building was constructed in 1973 originally, and it looked like a big circus tent, and that's why the architecture is kind of weird on the outside. I'll show you some pictures of what it looked like on the outside later in the video. I do get very nostalgic for the 1990s and the early 2000s, except when it comes to camera technology, because let's face it, the camera I'm using here is pretty damn awful by today's standards. It was a Sony Digital 8. It's the best thing that I could buy at the time, but the low light performance is just atrocious. I was actually walking around with one of those 1 million candlepower flashlights and just kind of blasting things with the flashlight just so you could actually make them visible. We've come a long way from these tape-based cameras, let me tell you. As you can see, now that I'm in the lower level of the IMAX theater, there's a lot of water damage from all the flooding that occurred down here, and this is why you don't build basements in Florida. When this park closed as a theme park, I guess they probably had sump pumps down here to keep this area dry, but obviously they powered them down when the park closed, and you can see that, I'm going to walk into the dressing room in a little bit, just absolutely destroyed all the drywall and everything down here, just because there probably was like 6, 8, 10 feet of water that was filling up the bottom level of this IMAX theater, when this building was vacant. So it's kind of cool that they had a picture of SeaWorld of Texas up on the wall here inside the IMAX theater. They were planning to build a second Boardwalk and Baseball park in Texas. So when I saved a lot of the paperwork from the park president's office, which is up on the second floor, and I'll point that office out to you, HBJ was pretty far along in their planning for their Texas version of the Boardwalk and Baseball park. They were going to build a second one of these parks. It never happened because HBJ ran into financial distress by 1990. That's why they were forced to sell this park as well as all their other theme park assets to Anheuser Busch. But the land that the Texas Aquatica Park sits on was intended to be Boardwalk and Baseball Texas. That was the long-term plan. They wanted to build multiple Boardwalk and Baseballs. They even were thinking about building one in Ohio because they had a SeaWorld in Ohio at the time. So right now I'm entering the Studio One Theater. This is where the ESPN Super Bowl of Sports Trivia TV show was filmed for 2 seasons. It was a fun little game show that was hosted by newscaster Chris Berman, and they used to have a bunch of college teams compete on sports trivia and hot potato events. They still occasionally rerun it on ESPN2 at late at night. I remember seeing it on TV only about 4 or 5 years ago. There's also a couple old episodes on YouTube, so you might check it out to see. It was pretty neat back in the day. Now, this IMAX theater complex was pretty big when it came to capacity. If I remember right, the IMAX theater could hold about 600 people. This Studio One had enough capacity to handle about 450 people in the crowd. And I remember when I was here, the IMAX theater was almost always packed. Studio One wasn't quite as popular. When they weren't filming the ESPN TV show, they had kind of like a mock game show, and they would just invite park patrons to compete for prizes and stuff. And I think they used to give away T-shirts and coffee mugs and that kind of stuff. And it wasn't as popular as the IMAX theater next door. So the Studio One theater was the one theater that actually had dressing rooms, and I'm about to walk down that staircase to show you what's left of them. When they originally built this for Circus World back in 1973, I wasn't able to figure out what they used this theater for. I was only about 6 years old the one time I actually came here when it was Circus World, and I have very little memory of that. I do remember there was some circus exhibits, and they had some glass cases of various displays in the concourse of this building. But what was housed in this theater, I'm not exactly sure. Some people have told me that this theater was used for like a trapeze show and basically kind of like stunt performers performing like eating fire and those type of things. That's the best thing that I can come up with. But if you know better and are more familiar with what was here when this park was still Circus World, then please comment below, because I'm always trying to learn as much as I can about this particular park. So as you can see from all the mold and water damage down here, this underground level where the dressing rooms were is just a complete write-off. We have so many thunderstorms and tropical storms that move through Central Florida. Every time like a heavy thunderstorm came through here, without the sump pumps turned on, this entire level was just submerged with water. You can definitely see the water line. Probably 6, 8, 10 feet of just standing water would fill down here all the time. I do miss this building a lot. I feel like this building, I kind of wish it had been repurposed into something else, maybe retail or something, just because of the quirkiness of it. I've never seen a building, engineered with this type of weird layout. And upstairs, there were some funky trapdoors and stuff that I think were left over from when there were like circus performances here and everything. So it was such a cool building. It does sadden me that it's gone now. But when you look around like this level, you can see why they knocked it down, because it was just completely destroyed. And once you get mold and water damage this bad, it's very difficult to bring a building back and have it habitable without making people sick. Anheuser Busch did keep some of the pieces of this park. For example, they took the Grand Rapids Log Flume that was next to this IMAX theater, and they relocated that to SeaWorld of Texas, and that became known as the Texas Splashdown. And that particular ride only recently got scrapped, I think within the last 10 years. The wooden roller coaster that was built here as the Hurricane for Circus World and later Boardwalk and Baseball, that actually did get relocated as well. It sold at auction when the park closed, and relocated to Magic Springs Amusement Park up in Arkansas. That only recently closed, although it is still standing. When they relocated that wooden roller coaster to Magic Springs Park, they renamed it the Arkansas Twister. Now, the other roller coaster that was located here at Boardwalk and Baseball was called the Double O, and that was an Arrow shuttle loop. And what was cool about the one here at Boardwalk and Baseball was actually the prototype for the shuttle loop. Now, they did go on and build quite a few of those Arrow shuttle loops at other parks, but this was the only one that actually had an elevator system that would bring riders up to the top of the ride. Everybody else at the future installations of that particular ride had to walk up quite a few flights of stairs. So Boardwalk and Baseball definitely had the superior version of that ride. That particular ride was relocated to Fun Spot Park in Indiana. It was renamed the Afterburner and operated all the way up into 2008. So it had a long run in Indiana, longer than when it was operating in Florida. So on the right-hand side of this concourse used to be the coin-operated lockers. This park was kind of laid out just like, I guess, the Magic Kingdom. You know how the Magic Kingdom has the coin-operated lockers on the first floor of the train station. The IMAX theater had all these coin-operated lockers on the right-hand side. I don't know who took those coin-operated lockers. They might have been repurposed and taken to one of the other Anheuser Busch parks. So on my right-hand side where this gate is down, that's where the main gift shop of the IMAX complex was located. One of the main things that they had here at the IMAX building was you could actually get your photo taken and printed out on a custom-made baseball card. And, I was a big Little League player back in the day, so I actually do have my customized baseball cards from Boardwalk Baseball still. I remember they used to market them as Faceball cards when they were trying to, sell these things to people in Boardwalk and Baseball. You used to be able to, make up your old stats on the back of the card and everything. It was kind of a cool, clever idea. You have to understand too, baseball cards were probably at their peak popularity circa 1988, 89. All the baby boomers were going back and buying up Topps and Donruss baseball cards. So baseball was just a lot more popular in the 80s during that particular era. I mean, you have to understand there were a bunch of baseball movies that were coming out too because baseball was so huge. I mean, the Major League movies, Bull Durham, The Natural. This park was built when baseball was the true national pastime of the United States, and I just don't think baseball was nearly as popular now as it was back then. So the stairwell and these gray doors located on my right-hand side, these are the exits for the IMAX theater. This is one of the few sections of the park that had like Disney-style automation where the doors would automatically swing open at the end of each IMAX film. Because this building was constructed in 1973, this was way before ADA compliance and everything, and a lot of these attractions were not very wheelchair friendly. You can tell that this building, they really didn't think about that stuff because there were just like these huge stairwells that were just wide open that you could accidentally roll right down without any kind of warning. Things have changed a lot since this park was built. One of the very bizarre parts about this particular building is it actually outlived the theme park by several years. When Anheuser-Busch purchased this theme park and closed it down in 1990, they auctioned off all the rides and basically cleared the theme park out. However, Anheuser-Busch would actually rent out this IMAX building as like a cheap conference center. And I know quite a few organizations used this as exhibit space for the early 90s, like 91, 92, 93. And, they used the kitchen for the quick service restaurant to cater the events. And I believe they did presentations in the Studio One because it still had all the PA systems and everything set up from the game show. They would just do presentations and like slideshows with like overhead projectors in that theater for a couple years. I know the Southwest Association of Car Dealerships had a conference here, as well as several like high school athletics organizations, and I believe there were even some trade shows that were set up here in the concourse for like goofy stuff like aluminum siding and mobile home parts and stuff. So this building was actually a lot of people would drive by this building and didn't know why it was still standing, and the parking lot was still pretty much all intact, and that's because it was rented out for several years after the park closed. So this second gift shop that I'm walking towards now, I believe this is where they stored the computers and the photography equipment for making the Faceball cards. And if I remember right, I think this was called like the Faceball shop, and the smaller gift shop was called like the Home Plate gift shop. You have to understand, these things were from like the 1980s, and I'm doing all this by memory. So when you're talking about something that was like 40 years ago now, the memories are starting to fade a little bit, and I'm just doing the best I can. If I recall, this was the place that they actually made the actual customized baseball cards. I do think this is pretty cool that, even though they spent like a year and a half redoing this park, turning it from Circus World into Boardwalk and Baseball, closing it down in '85 and reopening in '87. There's still some artwork that is hanging around from the days that this park was still Circus World. Uh, I really enjoyed finding this little logo on the door here. Well, that confirms my memory. There's the dressing room. That's where you would put on your baseball uniform to take your photo for your customized baseball cards. So, yeah, I'm in the right place. This is obviously where they were making the baseball cards back in the day. Now, this wide open area with the murals of Coney Island on the wall, there used to be a lot of like tables and chairs here. I do remember a snack bar and like just a quick service restaurant located over near the doors that swing out off to my right hand side. What's cool about this particular building is they filmed an episode of the syndicated TV show Superboy here. I think it was the seventh or eighth episode of the first season that was set in Boardwalk Baseball. There's a lot of shots inside this area where the cast is basically rehearsing for a rock concert. They could do like little special events in this area as well. I remember there being like a stage set up to do like small live performances. I mean, this isn't the largest area of the building. I mean, you could probably only fit like 200 or 300 people in here with tables and chairs, but I do remember them having some live entertainment in here as well as like the Chicken and Biscuits restaurant. If I'm not mistaken, this staircase with the glass wall next to it, I'm pretty sure this is where the actual photos were taken when you were making your customized baseball cards. I mean, I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, it was a long time ago, but I do vaguely remember walking up that little staircase. Now, that ballpark shown on the wall, that was the home stadium for the Kansas City Royals. One of the cool aspects of Boardwalk and Baseball was it was the spring training facility for the Kansas City Royals. They built a big baseball complex just to the east of this IMAX theater on the other side of the roller coaster. And they had a nice, like, I think it was an 8,000 seat baseball stadium, as well as they built like four baseball practice fields like next to each other. Even to this day, it was one of the largest spring training facilities ever built for a baseball team. When the Kansas City Royals weren't here, there was a AAA ball club that would use that stadium known as the Baseball City Royals. After that Baseball City Stadium was shut down, the Kansas City Royals moved their spring training facility over to Arizona. Now, a lot of the damage in here is exaggerated. This building was actually pretty structurally sound. There really weren't a lot of roof leaks per se. Like I said, the building was maintained all the way through 1996 97, used as a conference center. And this is only maybe 4 years after that. The reason the building looks so bad is I'm filming this right before they bulldozed it, And these last few weeks, they allowed the Polk County Fire Department to do a lot of practice drills and training here using the fire hoses and, breaking walls and stuff, to get some experience in, firefighting suppression techniques. I had walked through this IMAX building a couple weeks prior, and none of this damage in the concourse was here the last time I had walked through. So this is all new damage, and only the last few weeks right before the bulldozers came in. As I walk up the staircase to the second floor, I remember there being a bunch of more tables and chairs upstairs, so you could carry your food upstairs if there wasn't enough, seating downstairs. If I remember right from that episode of Superboy, Lana Lang was kind of like sitting with her arm over the handrail here as she was watching like Leif Garrett practice on stage for his rock concert and whatever. But this was pretty much the only section of the second floor that was open to the general public. You're going to notice that I'm going to quickly walk into the corporate offices of like HBJ Park operations. And, they had a lot of conference rooms up here. Like I said, the park president's office, his name was Richard Howard. He had his offices up here. And I realized that HBJ Parks ceased to exist after Anheuser Busch purchased their theme park assets, but it still shocked me that, I was up here like 10, 12 years later after they had closed down, and all those internal HBJ Park documents were just sitting in the file cabinet in Richard Howard's office, and, I saved them all. I've got a lot of the insider stuff that was confidential, eyes only, that was not to be shared with the public, things like the Texas Boardwalk and Baseball Park and, the SeaWorld in Motion regional theme parks that they planned. They planned to have like 15 or 20 SeaWorlds, across the nation. They weren't planning to build like parks as big as like the Orlando or Texas parks, but they were planning on, smaller regional parks that were maybe like 10 or 15 acres. And, like I said, all these internal HBJ expansion plans never saw the light of day and have never been shared with the public. I am working on a video where I'm going to go over those documents. I'll post it as soon as I can. So this is the room where I found the treasure trove of internal documents. I believe this room and conference area that's attached to it were the park president's offices, although all the signage on the doors and everything got taken down over the years. So I'm not 100% sure of that, but considering this is where all the file cabinets and everything ended up, I believe this is the president's office. Another cool thing that I found while I was here is all the park employees grabbed one of the poster boards that they had used for the game show downstairs, and they made a birthday card for the park president. I still have that birthday card. I thought it was pretty cool that because it's like almost all the park employees signed it, and it's just like a piece of history of this park. This room definitely shows the aftermath of the training sessions that the Polk County Fire Department used this building for. When you see drywall knocked out like this on the bottom, that's how they train the firemen to remove drywall, to go through walls, to rescue people from active fires and buildings and stuff. I kind of wish I lived in an alternate universe where HBJ Parks was not only still around, but leading the industry. The thing I always liked about going to HBJ Parks is they had more of that family-owned amusement park vibe. For a corporate-run theme park, they just, none of them felt like corporate-owned theme parks. When you go to Disney or Universal, everything's just so commercialized, and it's all consumerism and stuff. And I don't know, the HBJ parks were more just tight knit, and they felt a little more rough around the edges, like something like just a family ran them. And I kind of preferred that whole atmosphere. Boardwalk and Baseball was and probably will always be my favorite amusement park of all time. I mean, it's the first place I ever saw an IMAX movie. It's the first place I ever rode a wooden roller coaster. It's the first place I ever rode a log flume. There were just so many firsts at this park that I experienced that I'll never, you only have one first time. The other thing that I kind of miss is HBJ kept the pricing in Central Florida a lot more affordable. When Disney was the expensive option in town, you could go to a park in Orlando, and Boardwalk and Baseball was just a lot less expensive. I mean, I think their annual pass was almost the same price as the daily ticket price to Disney World. Without HBJ in the market, everybody's just pricing their stuff like Disney World, and they keep raising their prices every year. HBJ was definitely the budget option, and the admission prices to SeaWorld and Boardwalk and Baseball and Cypress Gardens were just a lot lower than Walt Disney World back in the day. When I make the video about all the documents that I rescued from this building, one of the things I will cover is some of the internal memorandums that were written between executives. It's funny, reading some of those documents, because people were really, really colorful back then with their their verbiage. I remember reading an internal document about they were evaluating the Colorado Riders Wild West show that was performing at this park. And man, when William Jovanovich, which I believe was the CEO of the HBJ company, some of his ways of describing how boring he thought the show was, it was crazy. People were just very outgoing back then, and not exactly politically correct. I'm looking forward to talking about those memorandums in the future video. It's just wild, because HBJ executives did squabble like a dysfunctional family. I tell you, if I could go back in time and worked at this park when it was open, that would have been like an amazing dream job. Unfortunately, this park went out of business when I was, I think about 12 years old, so it wasn't meant to be. I did get to work at like Cypress Gardens and a couple of the parks in Florida, state parks like Rainbow Springs and Silver Springs and those type of places. But I would have loved to have had the opportunity to work here at Boardwalk and Baseball. My dream job probably would have been, I would think, running the Florida Hurricane roller coaster. That's one of my favorite rides in the park. Well, maybe the Grand Rapids Flume, that would have been cool too. It just would have been an amazing thing to have worked here. Had I been an employee that worked here, I probably could have also told you what each of these rooms here in the IMAX theater were. But, once they took down the signage and stuff on each door and everything, I have no idea. Like, one office to the other, they all look the same to me. One of the things that I was able to successfully find in the field outside was I found the old concrete footers and some of the old wood supports that had built the Florida Hurricane. So I actually have a couple of the timbers off the Florida Hurricane that I still saved after all these years. Another thing that I had found were pieces of the old boardwalk. What was weird about Boardwalk and Baseball is they spent a lot of money, probably millions of dollars, buying jar wood, which is this very special, rare wood that is only grown in Australia. And they used that to build the boardwalk here at the park because they felt it was stronger than just pressure-treated lumber from Home Depot. I kind of wish they had just gone the cheap route on the boardwalk and spent more money on like thrill rides and dark rides to better compete with Disney, because
Back when this park opened in 1987, people were like, it's just a bunch of carnival rides and a couple roller coasters. And that's true, but so was Busch Gardens. Had they had a dark ride or a few more customized thrill rides, I think history would have been a lot different for Boardwalk and Baseball because, like I said, they were the budget offering back then. They had their own little niche. Their attendance was actually pretty good. It's just their loss leader approach to the front gates, thinking they would make it up on merchandise and concessions, wasn't exactly paying off. But again, the park was young. I mean, it was only 2.5 years old. They weren't really turning a nice profit yet. They really never had enough time to build up their audience. Anheuser Busch had always hated this park, even back when it was Circus World. And Boardwalk and Baseball was just so similar to Busch Gardens Tampa Bay, and it was so close. They did not like this park being here. So as soon as I heard that they were the ones who purchased Boardwalk and Baseball, I knew this park was going to get closed in a couple days, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. I think they closed this park maybe a week after they finished the sale.
So, what exactly happened to HBJ Parks? Well, they were actually a fairly successful theme park company. Boardwalk and Baseball and Cypress Gardens were only like modestly successful when it came to profitability. But because HBJ also had the SeaWorld parks in their portfolio, which were amazingly popular and hugely profitable, they are also very profitable as a book publisher, and HBJ still publishes books to this day. I mean, printing those college and high school textbooks is just a cash cow. And that's where the huge problem arose. They were raking in millions and millions of dollars in profits, and they became a target of a hostile takeover. And that was the beginning of the end for this park as well as Cypress Gardens. HBJ didn't want to be taken over by, an outsider. They spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on legal fees blocking that hostile takeover, and it absolutely crippled the company. Because of the massive levels of debt generated by this failed hostile takeover, HBJ Parks was forced to sell their entire theme park holdings. And to add insult to injury, HBJ Parks ended up selling to their most bitter and fierce competitor, which was Anheuser Busch at the time. The folks who were running Busch Gardens Tampa Bay absolutely hated Boardwalk and Baseball. It was always the thorn in their side. Anheuser Busch really only wanted the SeaWorld parks, and they quickly discarded Boardwalk and Baseball as well as Cypress Gardens. I have almost no doubt that if that hostile takeover didn't take place, Boardwalk and Baseball would still have been around today and would have probably evolved into another roller coaster park to, complement SeaWorld as like the roller coaster capitals of Central Florida. There's one thing that pretty much isn't debatable about Circus World and Boardwalk and Baseball. For its entire run, they had the absolute best roller coaster in all of Central Florida. Nothing came close to the size or speed and scale of that Florida hurricane. This is, the time frame of 1978 through 1990. If you looked at the ride lineup over Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay, they were all tiny roller coasters back then. It was just like the Scorpion and the Python, and they were like 45-second long Arrow and Schwarzkopf coasters. And this Florida hurricane just absolutely dwarfed anything they had. And, Disney never had anything close to that until well after the park's closure. I mean, you could even make a case that the Florida Hurricane was the best roller coaster in the entire state of Florida at the time. The only thing that really came close back then was the Starliner located at Miracle Strip in Panama City Beach. Well, at least I can tell you that I'm entering the accounting section of the building. Thankfully, this brown sign is still in place. Obviously, the door that's labeled Trivia Control, that's the control room for the lighting and sound system for Studio One. Unfortunately, a lot of these doors were jammed shut with broken doorknobs, so I couldn't actually show you what the equipment looked like inside. I don't know who
took the signage off all the doors on that corporate floor. I mean, if they still had them, I mean, I could tell you, like, I knew, like, most of the executives at HBJ Parks because I have all the internal memorandums and stuff. I could be like, well, this is the engineering department, this is the park president, this is park operations, this is the maintenance department. Most of those documents, heck, I still even have payroll. I have like canceled checks of paychecks and stuff. So I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that I was able to save, and had they just not taken those damn little brown signs off of each door upstairs, I could have told you what each room did. Oh man, the wood paneling. So when you get to some of these internal rooms that you're only accessible by the executives, you kind of know what this room was built for. Executives had they wanted their little private executive time with their secretaries, and I know they used to have a hot tub at like the Atari corporate headquarters too. And you know what was going down in that hot tub. People copulated a lot in the 1970s and 80s, and when you see rooms built like this, that's probably mostly what they were built for. The serious safe. Oh, don't leave home without it. Soothes away upset stomach. So I can only assume that giant safe in the middle of the IMAX building was where they kept all the cash collected at the end of the day. The 1970s, almost everybody used cash back then. So I'd imagine there were tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars going through this building, every weekend. I am fascinated by this IMAX building. I mean, it really was built like a fortress. I realize this building is really peculiar, even though it was designed to look like a circus tent on the outside. It was really a steel building underneath the fabric. And when they pulled the fabric off and turned it into a modern, contemporary-looking commercial building for the Boardwalk and Baseball renovation, they retained about 90% of the layout. They just added glass windows to the top floor. So it was a pretty modest change, at least when it comes to the structure of the building. When you're walking around, this layout definitely feels like a castle just because of, the circular corridors and all the weird mezzanines and stairwells. Here's another interesting bit of trivia about this building. When this building was being converted over by HBJ into Boardwalk and Baseball in 1986, HBJ Parks printed out 8 reproductions of various Norman Rockwell paintings. They were 80 feet high, each of them. There were 8 of them bolted to the roof of this building. This is one of those additions that I always kind of scratched my head on. As a kid, I couldn't really tell what they were up on the roof. They were at kind of a peculiar angle too, so you really would have needed a helicopter to truly appreciate them. Okay, so now I'm going to briefly pause this exploration video to address all the lies and gaslighting that have been told about Boardwalk and Baseball since it closed. Let's start with what some of the nameless Walt Disney World executives said to the Orlando Sentinel back when there was a bidding situation for Boardwalk and Baseball as well as the SeaWorld parks. Here's the quote: "Boardwalk and Baseball is an enigma. Even if we successfully purchased the park, we wouldn't know what to do with it." Well, you see, that quote might carry a lot more weight if Walt Disney World didn't blatantly plagiarize the entire Boardwalk and Baseball theme park concept to create Disney's California Adventure 15 years later. And they didn't just stop there. Disney cloned the entire layout from Baseball City to create the ESPN Wide World of Sports a decade later. But Disney wasn't done yet, because they decided to clone the entire Boardwalk and Seaside theme for the Disney Boardwalk Resort in Florida. Now to address the biggest bullshitters of the entire world, Anheuser Busch. If you have talked to as many Boardwalk and Baseball employees as I have, the recurring theme that you always get in almost every conversation is Pathological Liars, and Anheuser Busch. When Anheuser Busch closed Boardwalk and Baseball in January 1990, it went on the record as saying the park had never been profitable. Here's the little wrinkle with their truckload of bullshit. HBJ was a publicly traded company, and they spent the last 3 years showing the profits of Boardwalk and Baseball on their balance sheet. So the only way to make Anheuser-Busch's gaslighting work means that HBJ Parks committed fraud for 3 years in a row and lied to the stockholders for basically the entire time of the park's existence. Here's a fun little article from the Orlando Sentinel published in August 1987. And according to this article, Boardwalk and Baseball was already turning a monthly profit as early as June 1987, only 2 months after the park's grand opening. Here's an article from 1988, also from the Orlando Sentinel, where HBJ Parks is bragging about theme park revenue being up 30% thanks to the grand opening of Boardwalk and Baseball. Here's another newspaper article from 1988, where Boardwalk and Baseball was bragging about first-year attendance of 1.3 million guests. Also in the article, they were bragging about how they sold 400,000 hot dogs at the park, as well as 4.3 million soft drinks. Do you have any idea what the profit margin on a hot dog is at a ballpark? It's about 600 to 700%. You know what kind of profit margin comes with selling a soft drink? Anywhere from 900% to 1,000% profit margin. So now let me give you some insight on how Anheuser-Busch rationalized their lies. Boardwalk and Baseball was pretty much under construction for its entire existence. They barely finished the baseball stadium by the time Anheuser-Busch closed the entire park. Even though the investment in the baseball stadium took place in 1986, they used those construction costs against the annual profits at Boardwalk and Baseball to make the balance sheet look negative. It was the biggest scam there ever was, all to push Anheuser-Busch's agenda. So let's look at this park acquisition in hindsight. Anheuser-Busch paid $1.1 billion for 6 theme parks, and through sheer incompetence, they ran 3 of those theme parks into the ground and out of business within only a couple years. You know how many theme parks Anheuser-Busch now runs? 0. Anheuser-Busch doesn't even run the 2 theme parks with their name on them anymore. The 2 Busch Gardens, as well as the SeaWorld parks that still survive, are now run by United Parks and Resorts. So now it's time to set the record straight about Boardwalk and Baseball. Here are the facts. Let's look at the 1988 performance of HBJ Parks from their balance sheet. The 6 HBJ theme parks generated $388 million in gross revenue for 1988. They turned $62 million profit from the 6 theme parks that year. Boardwalk and Baseball represented $3.72 million worth of that profit. Boardwalk and Baseball had built a successful business model around international travelers. Their marketing team were working with travel agents and these big tour groups, and they were making a bunch of money off of more or less chartering the park out to these groups for large functions. This park turned a profit every year it was open. Enough of the lies already. Boardwalk and Baseball wasn't bringing in the money like SeaWorld Orlando was, but it was still bringing in money. Boardwalk and Baseball almost caught Cypress Gardens in its first year for attendance. Boardwalk did 1.3 million guests, and Cypress Gardens did 1.4 million guests. That's pretty damn good considering Cypress Gardens had been open for 55 years to build up that marketing and reputation. So enough of the gaslighting on the internet about this topic. Boardwalk and Baseball didn't flop. Its parent company had a giant financial collapse that had nothing to do with the theme parks. So enough already. So I should probably talk about what caused HBJ's financial collapse. There was a British book publisher that attempted a hostile takeover, and in order to fight off the acquisition, HBJ financed a huge recapitalization of the company. They more or less bribed their existing stockholders to retain the current management of the company. The problem was they created an unsustainable level of debt for the organization. They turned their $700 million debt load into $3 billion. While Harcourt still technically has survived as a book publisher, the assets were pretty much sold off to another company, and that debt load pretty much gutted the entire company. They had to sell off pretty much all their assets over time just to pay off that $3 billion. If you read any retrospectives or talk to HBJ executives, they will always say now that that recapitalization was the biggest mistake they ever made, and it pretty much led to the demise of the company. Like I said, technically, Harcourt's name still lives on in book publishing, but it's really just a name only. So right now, I believe I'm in the Projector Room. This is where the IMAX Control Center was located. If you're not familiar with IMAX film, I believe it uses a 70 millimeter frame, but it's more vertical than traditional 70 millimeter, because 70 millimeter, like CinemaScope and those type of things, were like a widescreen aspect ratio, and IMAX is more vertical. They basically project like almost like a rectangular box, and it's 6 stories high. The film cans for an IMAX film, I actually had the Grand Canyon film. The 45-minute film, the reel is about 6 feet across, and it weighs like about 120 pounds. The thing was insane, and I brought the IMAX film home, and then I realized I just couldn't. I didn't have the space. I mean, I lived in a condo at the time, and I didn't have the space to store it, so I ended up giving it away to a friend. The IMAX Control Center here is just amazing, and a surprising amount of equipment is still here from the IMAX films, and this is probably really expensive equipment. I know building an IMAX theater back in the 70s was probably like millions of dollars, because the equipment was really large and bulky and rare. If you're wondering why the ceiling is down in this room, they did bring in recyclers to go through the entire building and gut it as best as they can. They were pulling down all the electrical conduit out of the walls and the ceiling while I was there, removing the signage that I brought home. One of the interesting things about this park is there are pieces of it that still have survived and are intact and are just under the ground right now. Whenever Posner Park gets redeveloped in the future, they're probably going to scratch their heads when they realize part of this building is still sitting underneath Dick's Sporting Goods. The foundation, like I said, goes down about 60 feet, and it wasn't possible to bring up the entire slab just because of how thick and how far down it went. So the IMAX building is still sort of there. Another interesting thing is roughly in the location where they built the Apex Posner Park apartments is sitting on an animal graveyard. All the animals that passed away here at Circus World Theme Park, that park was open for about 12 years, they just buried out in the yard. So there's a bunch of circus performing animals that are buried out there, including elephants and tigers and horses and pretty much any other animals that performed at Barnum and Bailey Circus. I think that even included bears. So a bunch of apartments are sitting on top of those grave sites. I'm curious if any of those residences are currently haunted. Well, this room is pretty easy to identify. This is clearly a mailroom and office supply storage closet area too. I know they used to have a bunch of executive mailboxes in here. You can see where some of the in and out boxes were once located, I guess. This was probably like the main communication hub. Back in the 80s, there were no emails or anything like that. Everybody communicated on paper. This room would have been vital for communication throughout the building. One of the things I'm very proud of as a YouTuber is I definitely take a deeper dive in certain topics than other YouTubers have attempted. I've pretty much watched every video on Boardwalk and Baseball and Circus World on YouTube, including the ones made by like Adam the Woo and Theme Park History. None of them are ever going to try to go into the depth that I'm planning on for this particular topic. Once I'm finished with all these vlogs, I'll spend probably about 5 to 6 hours total on this particular topic.
I'm actually working on 2 videos in the future. One of them is going to be going through all the paperwork of all the future plans for HBJ Parks that never happened, like SeaWorld in Motion, like the regional parks, as well as the suspended roller coaster that was going to be built here at Boardwalk and Baseball. And I'm going to be posting the second exploration video of me showing you what was left of Baseball City Stadium, as well as the former boardwalk of the theme park. I'm going to show the actual demolition of the IMAX building as well. I've got all that footage coming up. I'm going to try to post it within the next year. If one thing comes out of all these videos that I post about Boardwalk and Baseball, I hope I can finally dispel all the misinformation and just outright lies that exist about the park after it closed. All 6 HBJ parks were profitable. They didn't have a choice, they were under the gun. The only thing keeping that parent company alive were the profits coming from the theme parks. Anheuser Busch in 1989 came in and purchased 6 theme parks and single-handedly killed 3 of them. The deaths of Cypress Gardens, SeaWorld of Ohio, and Boardwalk and Baseball are entirely their fault. And the fact that they sold off all their theme parks since this happened, to me demonstrates a self-awareness that they realized how lousy they are at running theme parks. Anheuser Busch's theme park division pretty much left behind a legacy of endless failures. And right now in this video, I happen to be walking around the one that hurt the most. Well, I hope you enjoyed this blast from the past looking at the old Boardwalk and Baseball theme park. You know, I really did enjoy my time exploring this IMAX theater about 25 years ago, and I'm happy that I was able to bring this to YouTube finally after all these years. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe.